Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded webinar from Auxilio and the Bold Legal Group. Today we're looking at HM Land Registry's latest avoidable requisition data release, what it tells us about current post-completion performance, what practical steps firms can take to reduce repeat errors, save time, money and improve outcomes. The latest data set covers Q4 2025 and Q1 2026 and is the second data set in the series. Land Registry has reported continued improvement across the sector, including a 7% reduction in avoidable requisition rates, which is great. But the purpose of this two-part webinar is not just to look at the headline figure. We want to explore what the data means in practice for busy conveyancing firms, particularly those dealing with high monthly completion volumes. I'm joined today by Roger Holden from HM Land Registry, Louise Edwards from InfoTrack, Kate Forsdyke from PCS Legal, and Adil Hamid from Auxilio. We will look at the data, the operational realities behind it, and practical changes that firms can make now. I intend to direct one question to each panelist, but will invite comment and discussion from the others as and where necessary. So let's kick off, if we can please, Roger, with you. The latest Land Registry data shows avoidable requisitions are continuing to fall, which I said is great. What should firm take from this second data set? And where should they focus their attention next?
Well, firstly, thanks for organising this. It's a fantastic opportunity just to talk about the avoidable requisition data set. Quite a mouthful, but it's been really well received, and I'm really thrilled about that. This is the second one we've published. In total, we've sent out 3 now, as we worked with the industry to build a partnership to say, before we published any data, we shared what was going out. And as you say, 7% reduction this time in the last 6 months. And if you remember, in the first time we put this out before this, in the first set that wasn't published, in the first published set, we saw a 29% reduction. So over that 18-month period, we're really, really pleased to see what's happening and what's being involved and engaged with in a partnership to help everybody, because those requisitions are time consuming and costly for everybody. But also those requisitions mean we can move faster, and that, I know, is what we're trying to do: faster, better, easier services. So what should people take away from it? I think firstly, congratulations to everybody for all the work they've done so far, but I think we can all agree there is more to do, and we can help each other to achieve that and to deliver more. I think they should also look at the data very much as what is happening now. I am aware that obviously people will want to look at the last time they got data, but I think what they've got to remember is volumes change, application types change, and therefore what they are sending in and what we are seeing is slightly different. So I wouldn't be too concerned if I was a firm if it was moving around just a little bit. I don't think that's a major issue. What I would say is look at your competitors, look at the market. Obviously, when the data was released, we give a top line figure out. So you'll see how everybody else is doing and get a figure for how everybody else is engaging and working towards reducing those avoidable requisitions as much as we can through delivering complete and correct applications, which makes everybody's life easier and delivers what everybody wants.
So where have you seen the greatest improvements?
It's an interesting one. We've seen better. If you look at what we sort of look at the most, which is missing information, very much variations in names between what's on the documents and what we're getting in. So the historic documents, the official copies, perhaps the deeds, and what we're actually seeing on the forms that are being sent to us. Identity, plans and descriptions are just missing bits and paper. I mean, one of the things that you will hear me talk about is just that simple attention to detail that I know is a challenge when you're dealing with mass applications where you get a lot of paperwork going through. But I think the biggest reduction we're seeing is that attention to detail is definitely coming through. So a 4-page deed with 1 page the wrong way around when it's scanned. So we get 3 pages and then we get a blank page. Someone's checking those. Someone's looking through them really quickly and spotting those particular mistakes, because I know that's infuriating for everybody involved in the chain. ID is getting better, and I think we're seeing a really big change in everybody really taking a care and interest in that. And when I talk about ID, it's making sure that the documents are right, but also witness ID. We talk a lot about filling in those forms correctly, and I understand if people aren't putting in a postcode, because to them it's obvious where that person lives. That street is perhaps round the corner from where they live or they work. But when you're dealing with the land registry, we have to make sure the integrity of the register is everything, because that's absolutely the baseline that we all need. So that simple lack of the last 3 letters of a postcode is going to cause us to requisition you, which is going to cost money, take time, and slow everybody down. So that's where we're seeing the most improvement. But as I say, we're really, really excited to see the movement that we've got to date. But we also realise that there's a way to go to actually develop this and to move it on further.
So, Kate, would you agree with what Roger has said? Are those the
Yeah,
changes and improvements, sorry, you've seen?
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, from our point of view, when the first data was released, was it around about October time off the top of my head? I mean, PCS, I think our percentage was 7.17% for avoidable requisitions. So it wasn't horrendous, but obviously it could do a lot better. So we knew that there was work to be done from our side, and for us to pinpoint exactly where it was going wrong, where we could get that percentage down. And we've actually been having monthly meetings with the Land Registry, and they've given us the data as to what the avoidable requisitions were, which was really, really helpful, because then we could then go back to our post-completion team to then recognise what we could do better and make our processes better to actually avoid them. So.
And Kate, that's exactly what I think we're all asking to do. So just to be clear, we write to thousands of customers, and just in case there's any confusion, if you didn't get it, let's just clarify that up a little bit. To make the statistics seem fair, you have to put in at least 10 applications every 6 months, because we do get people who put in, say, 4 applications in a 6-month period, and 2 of them were wrong. Suddenly they get a 50% rating. I think that would be unfair and would actually be something that wouldn't be supportive. So if you're not getting one, that's a potential reason why. After that, we write to thousands of customers. And as you say, Kate, we give them the top line percentage, but then we break it down for everybody. So every firm is getting, you made X number of these mistakes, X number of those mistakes. And as you say, what we're trying to do is to help everybody build a clearer understanding of, it's this area you need to look at. And that's when we're really sort of relying on sort of the professionally trained or the more experienced people within your post-completions team to say, well, this is the area where we can improve this, or this is the check that we should put in before we hit submit. And I think that's the issue, that, you know, if you rush to submit, you could end up creating your own delay. And it's something that, you know, the problem for us is we know that the industry relies on the integrity of the register, that it's the backbone, the foundation of how conveyancing works. Therefore, it has to be right, it has to be accurate, and it has to be the data that you can rely on. That's why we end up sending out the requisitions. So I think the other thing to talk about is actually the support. It's great that you're getting support, Kate, but also the customer training team. You know, we are in June putting on 2 what we call application support workshops, and we'll go through the biggest in terms of the number of avoidable requisitions. So we'll actually sit down and go, this is what we mean by this. This is what we want when you send us in the information. This will help to give what we have committed to doing, which is making it easier and faster and better. You know, for those of you who perhaps don't follow the intricacies of how we communicate with the ministry, our chairman wrote a letter back, and it was very clear. He said, look, we know we've got to make it better for customers, faster and easier. And this data is a part of that process, but also the support we wrap around it externally. And if you want, we can talk about things that we're doing internally as well, because we realize that we need to support you as much as possible. So continual looking at practice. What are we doing internally? Are the requisitions actually fit for purpose? Is there some way that we can look at a requisition and interpret it in a different way so it doesn't require it to be sent out? And the other one is working with all of you to provide the best technical support. So validation, and trying to stop them actually coming in the same way that a lot of firms, when you put in your credit card, for example, online, would say that's not a valid credit card. We're using that same technology and saying, hang on, that piece of information doesn't quite match with what we're doing. So that's it. And by the 1st of November this year, all of the applications that come into Land Registry will have that ability to be pre-checked on these, so what we call avoidable requisition points. So again, technology, process, and partnership. I think it's the best way that we are to actually make what everybody wants, which is that faster, easier service. Last thing that I haven't mentioned is training, and I think it's really important. A lot of people could say, well, hang on, this is great. You're pushing a lot of this responsibility out to the customer. Well, also what we're doing internally is we're absolutely improving our training and our support and our development of our caseworkers. So again, the people who are actually looking at applications, to make sure that they're not making mistakes that perhaps in a way that are wrong. And we admit that, you know, just like, you know, people who send in requisitions once in a while, things go wrong. applications come through that are wrong. I'm sure we are not, we are humble. We know that we are doing the same thing, but we're working very hard, not only to ask you to train your staff, but we're also very hard working to make sure that we're developing and training our staff so that doesn't happen as well. That's the kind of wraparound that we really see the data being a cornerstone of, an anchor with, but obviously the bigger offer that we can do together.
I think you briefly mentioned the rush to submit. Is there a perceived misconception that that rush is being forced upon conveyancers by some lenders?
I can't really speak for lenders and I can't really speak for conveyancers. Perhaps that's a question for Kate to sort of talk about that relationship. But as I said, from our perspective, especially when if you look at the way that we're, recently we put out, Neil Sashdev, who was our chairman, wrote a note saying, just under 50% of some of the applications that come in. So that's the applications to update titles we're doing in a week. So the idea that you're lodging it and then you can pop back in and you can sort out any errors on that, you might actually get caught out. If you wait a little bit longer, get it right, you won't get the requisition. So again, I realise, and we were, again, apologies for the backlog. I know it was a real issue, and it went, we're working really, really hard on it. But it's clear to us that we are working very hard with, we're working to reduce that as much as we possibly can, and we'll continue to focus on that because we know it's an issue that's not only causing issues for the industry, but it's causing issues for your clients who are using it, the people who are living in the property or own the land. We'll continue to work on that as well. So again, lots happening in terms of speed. But if you think you can put something into the system and then catch up later, sometimes you miss out, and that's where we have problems about people feeling that that's the way to do stuff.
You've headed me off at the pass well there with the backlog, Roger, because I was going to raise that, and also the requisitions that are being asked aren't always consistent, perhaps. But just going back to you, Kate, do you feel there's a rush to submit your applications?
Yeah.
If so, where does that come from?
It definitely comes from the lenders, because if we don't submit them within a certain amount of time, then we obviously get the chasers, we get asked why it hasn't gone in, and it might be that we're waiting for other documents like certificates of compliances or something like that. So we do feel massive pressure just to get them in as quick as possible, which then in turns creates requisitions if they're not perfect. So it is a fine balance really, just to try and get it, the ones that we can get right, but then there are going to be ones where we're waiting for stuff. It's impossible not to. But like from the lenders, we also get chasers for all the first registrations, which we know take a long time, and the pressure from that side of it is a lot for our teams to take. So they do feel they have to almost rush for it to get it in. So
I might be mistaken, but I thought these days lenders could be updated via HMLR.
Yes, they can be, but so they can do on the lender exchange and the LMS system, but a lot of the time we still get spreadsheets of files that we still have to put on, and then if you sometimes, especially I think on lender exchange, if you can't complete one part, then you can't move on to the next part and stuff like that. So the tech of it could be a bit better, I think, in terms of, because it's not, each case is so different as well, and there might just be a different issue on one of them to another. But yeah, we can update them to a certain extent, but it doesn't stop them requesting updates as well at the same time.
Okay, thanks. I mean, Louise, Adele, have you got any comments to make on what we've said so far, particularly that last comment maybe?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, like, it is a big reminder of all the different plates that conveyancers and conveyancing firms sort of constantly have to spin. Like everyone's aligned, I think, in the goal. And so it's exciting to sort of talk a bit more about this today. But yeah, it's just a reminder of all the things that they're sort of having to do at this stage when their clients have got the keys, they've completed in terms of funds and things like that. But the pressures and the admin time haven't really stopped for the law firms here.
I think just to add to that, I think the role of I know not every firm has a post-completion department, but I think the role of post-completion has grown massively over the years. It's not just about getting the AP1 in to the land registry. It's so much more than that now. They've got to update the lender exchange, the LMS. They've got to deal with management companies and notices, and it's so much bigger. And now with all the stamp duty stuff that's coming in, it's probably going to increase that even more. But I feel like the role is misconceived in that they think, oh, it's just putting the AP1 in, scanning a few documents and that's it. And it's, that's the easy part, so it's much, much, much more than that.
Yeah, I think just on that, I think Kate's absolutely right. Like the AP1 is probably the easiest part to do, especially when you've got tools from the likes of InfoTrack, etc., that integrate with your system. It's actually pretty straightforward. It's everything that comes before, where our teams also spend most of their time is not spent on actually doing the submission. It's on all of those checks before submission, making sure the file's ready to actually then be submitted, so there's no requisition. That's actually where most of the work is done. And something that Kate mentioned about sort of files missing, and it's something that's in the data as well, that the leading cause of requisitions, Roger, if I'm not mistaken now, is missing documents. Is that right? Yeah, and that's something that we see a lot. I mean, again, coming back to tools like InfoTrack, they do a great job at sort of looking at the chain variations in names and looking at values and inconsistencies. But if the documents are not there, then what are you going to do? And add to that the pressure that Kate's talked about from the lenders and the rush to submit, then you've got this perfect storm, which is why that requisition rate on missing documents is as high as it is.
Before we just go to the second question, then, if I come back to you quickly, Kate. So Roger mentioned training, I think internal for HMLR and external for conveyancers and law firms. Do you take advantage? You obviously train internally. Do you take advantage of the HMLR training that they produce?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, we've been having meetings with a designated person at the Land Registry for since about October time. And I think every other month she does a designated training session with our team, which is brilliant. And like, for example, I think there was one last month on new build registrations, because we do a lot of new build work. So that is really helpful, because I think, again, you're looking at the data and what the Land Registry are looking at, and then how can we improve our processes. And I'm a massive advocate for training anyway, so it can never do any harm, can it? But I think the Land Registry now have actually got like a university section, which is great for if we have new people come in to take up that role, then we can direct them there initially, without then having to organise an actual session. But we've found it massively helpful in terms of training our teams, and that can only make things better.
Okay, thanks. Roger, do you want to comment on the University of HMLR or whatever the term?
It's lovely, Kate, that you're using everything we do. Let me break it down really quickly for you. We run a customer training hub, which is where you will find a large amount of information. We start with what we call the Essentials Pack. So those people that are brand new to the business, who've never perhaps worked in Land Registry, that's the Essentials Pack. And again, that's because of feedback saying, help us when new people come to the industry. It is complicated, and if you can support them through that initial period, then we do, as you said, the application support webinars and things of that nature, where we will just be looking, as I said, 2 times in June, we'll be looking exactly at the figures that are coming out and saying these are the big ones that we can do to support those internal discussions within organisations across England, Wales and Scotland as well, where people are working in the English and Welsh market and saying, okay, how can we get better? So again, we're not asking you just to look at this data and be isolated. We're asking really for you to join us and engage with it. And just to talk about new builds, absolutely, Kate's absolutely right. We have a specific training module, which is just for new builds, because that's so important in terms of not just looking at what we call the avoidable requisitions, but looking at that wider, more niche area of, okay, this is the new build work. And again, there's something exciting coming up later in the year. We're expanding that. So we've looked at that, and we've got feedback from people like Kate saying, that's great. Could you just expand that and look into a different area? And also within the month of June, we'll be putting in a first registrations module again into the training hub for people who deal with those areas, to help help them understand what the information we're looking at, why we're looking at it in a particular way, and therefore helping people. So great, Kate, that you're using it. I'd encourage everyone to use the Training Hub, join and sign up for our sessions. And the last plug, because it is a plug, thank you, Rob, is we do actually now have a quarterly newsletter that goes out calling First Right Time. And again, it's full of that support, but it's also there just to have a discussion and an engagement. And anybody in your firm can sign up for that. So if you have an issue with just wanting to get hold of that very simple push piece of outgoing communication and support, get in contact with me. But if not, search for it. It's just HMLR Training Hub on any of your favorite search engines, and you'll find the area to go and have a good look around and support it. But Kate, great that you're using it, and it's really lovely to be supportive of the industry with providing this information.
Well, that's a great first set of answers to the first question, quite detailed. If we can now move on to the second question. So, Kate, for firms handling high monthly completion volumes, where do avoidable requisitions most often become operational problems, and what practical changes make the biggest difference to you?
Yeah, so I think from our point of view, when we were first given the data about the avoidable requisitions, I think one of the main ones, which was quite horrifying, that actually came up was ticking the joint tenants in common box. And that was like 2% of our avoidable requisition rates. We just thought, why is this happening? And when we actually broke it down, it was when the transfers were coming in from the seller's representative, the box wasn't ticked and that was going in, and people were just forgetting to do it. So I think, we just then created a simple checklist for handover between the conveyancing team and the post-completion team, to actually make sure that everything is ticked and is in the right place before anything actually gets lodged. So really it was just a bit of a review of our processes, because we found a lot of the avoidable requisitions were from the handover time. So I think the conveyancing teams, they're in a rush to do the completion, done the completion, great. They then pass it on to post-completion to then deal with, and it's out of their hair. And I think that was where we were finding most of the issues were coming from. So we I think then we put more emphasis on the conveyancers to just double check everything before it goes in, and even just simple things like making notes if there's something quirky on there that needs to be looked at before it goes in. It's just admin-y, simple, easy things. But just by doing that, so as I said before, our avoidable requisition rate was 7.17 in October, and our goal was actually to reduce it by 2%, and we've actually gone down to, I think it's 3.79 was our last one. So it's actually massively helped just by tweaking a couple of processes here and there. So
just going back to you, Roger, if I can, is there like an average percentage you would want the average firm to meet?
I don't think that's fair, because I don't think anyone will ever get to a situation where these will not happen. So I think that we would obviously love it to be a zero-sum game. It would be great for everybody involved in the industry. It would be lovely for Land Registry as well. But I think we've got to realise that, as you say, sometimes, Kate, somebody's not going to tick the right box. What we're really looking at is what is something that happens more frequently in your organisation that perhaps hasn't been talked about or hasn't been engaged with. But in terms of the overall percentage, the lower the percentage, the better for everyone, better for the speed and the accuracy that everyone's getting through the entire process that leads to a better register. I would say that the key thing is that I wouldn't focus on the percentage. I think the percentage there, Kate's a lovely sort of way to sort of look at your point and go, yay, look at what we've done. But it's really, I think, that the data that we're trying to give you, which says, look at this area and see if there's something that you can do. We put a lot of flow charts into the training hub to try and help people streamline processes. And I'm sure that, both in terms of what we can do with technology, but also with companies that, Adil represents, there is an opportunity in those type of companies to help with that as well. But from my point of view, Robert, I don't think we should focus on exactly what the percentage is, because I think that's perhaps a false area to look at. What I think it's about is the granularity of the data, if I start sounding like a marketeer, which I am, but it's this, we're giving lots and lots of people very specific data about their actions and how they can change them. And Kate's the perfect example of somebody who's taken that role on board. I know it's great. You said you wanted a 2% reduction, but actually you can just look at the better services, the better processes, and the better outcome, which is not only great for you, but it's also great for the clients that are employing you as their conveyancer.
I mean, I know you're saying not to focus on the percentages, but I think from our point of view, it's kind of the only thing that we've got to see that there's been an improvement, because we obviously we can do all the training, we can put all the processes and procedures in place, but unless we've got the data, then we don't know if it's working or not. So I think for us, just to see that improvement, all right, we're never going to get to zero, I know that, but to be honest, I'm quite happy now with our percentage as it is, and and also a lot of people are looking at this data. I know regulators are looking at it, and lenders are probably looking at it, and so actually, I think there's more emphasis on it than you probably realise. And I think for bigger firms, it's the only thing that we've got, because we can't see it. Whereas you can see the data and the percentages, and that's all we can go on at the minute.
Yeah, as I say, your email that you get though is very, very broken down, and I totally realise that perhaps at the higher level it's very clear. I would say though, one of the things, the reason that the industry particularly likes this is we did since 2018 put out a requisition figure, and I think when you look at that figure, that was the top line, that was every possible requisition. And for some firms who do perhaps new builds where it's more challenging in the requisition space, or you're doing first registrations again where we are likely to come back with more questions, it perhaps didn't present the most transparent or fairest look at this. But what's great about these requisition points we're looking at is they are identical across every firm, and they are more the ones that you have to do, which is the name right, is the witnesses right. That doesn't matter whether it's a first registration or just a change of a remortgage. We're looking at those ones, and therefore if we can get that focus and that attention to detail, I hope, Kate, that within your organization there's a feeling that there's a cultural change, which is actually taking that attention to detail is proving to be useful. And I'm kind of hoping it's spreading across all of the points that you look at, rather than just the ones that are in the avoidable requisition data set.
Yeah, definitely. But it's great to go back to the teams and say, look, this is what you've done over the last 6 months, and it's just nice for them to, because again, they don't know, they're putting in the AP ones and stuff, but it's just nice for them to see an improvement as well.
Yeah, well,
I'm glad you mentioned the outside bodies that are looking at this information. Kate, gives me a reason to plug the Bold Legal Group conference in 10 days' time, although we are sold out. We will be exploring this subject again, and we will have a lender on the panel. The Nationwide are going to join us and go into that particular topic in a bit more detail. So thanks for that. Adil, Louise, do you want to comment on anything that's been said in this second question?
Go ahead, Louise.
Yes, there's quite a bit I think that we'll talk about sort of in the next session, but definitely, like Kate, as you call out about, we talk a lot about post-completion problems actually being pre-completion problems. And obviously, if you've got a dedicated post-completion team, they are probably doing everything that they can to get those applications in as quickly and accurately as possible, as is their, job and what they're being told to do. So we need to make sure that anything that's getting done sort of further upstream has like a positive impact on post-completion, and they're given the right they're set up to succeed, basically. Like, how can we ensure that the whole process from onboarding to post-completion is all connected up, and you're not having, I guess, like holes in your bucket, basically, for like incorrect information to flow through.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting hearing from Kate, actually, in that specific example, because it's obviously, you've got smaller conveyancing firms where they might not have a dedicated post-completion team, but for larger firms, just because there is a post-completion team doesn't necessarily mean everything's in order. Really small process issues can be magnified, and the example you gave is just such a good example that you found this one little thing, and your requisition rate has gone down by 2%, maybe not entirely just because of that one thing, but it's made a meaningful difference. And I think that's where we also see with some of our larger customers is where there's they may or may not have a process manual. If they don't have a process manual, then you should put one in place to capture everything. And if there is one, there's still issues that can arise. But yeah, that was a really, really great example.
Okay, thanks, Adil. So finally, Kate, then, what would you recommend, without repeating yourself, firms review first if their own data shows recurring avoidable requisition? Where should they start?
I think you need to look at the data as to what the requisition is, because I think that's what we do. As Roger said, it is broken down for us, and then you need to work on your processes then to find out why that keeps happening. Is it one person that needs extra training, or is it a team? Is it the conveyancer? And that's exactly what we did. And then you can pinpoint where the problem is to deal with it. So that is, I find it's not the actual requisitions. It's a little bit of everything. So there's lots of things to change rather than it just being one big problem. So you just need to identify what one that is.
Okay, thanks. Well, if everyone's had their say on the first two questions, I'll wind up. Thank you to all of our speakers for joining this discussion. The key point for firms is that avoidable requisitions are not just an admin issue. They affect capacity, turnaround times, client service, profit, and operational confidence. The latest land registry data gives firms a clearer opportunity to understand where issues are occurring and where improvement activity should be focused. The most useful next step is to review your own data, identify repeat patterns, as Kate has just said, make use of HM Land Registry's training and support materials, and consider whether your current post-completion process has the right people, technology, and quality controls in place. So thank you for watching part one of this webinar.